second session. Issues here. Okay, our next session is a very comprehensive panel. We are going to cover climate justice, decolonization, indigenous people's rights, and just and equitable transitions. We're about to start our next session. Let's take our seats for the panel. This panel will frame one of the workshops for this afternoon, but will be very interconnected with all the discussions we've had this whole week and the work that we will do moving forward. Deputy General Secretary. All right, welcome back. This second panel is on climate justice, decolonization, indigenous people's rights, and just and equitable transitions. This panel will be moderated by David Boyes, who is the Deputy General Secretary of Public Services International. And the panelists will include Sebastian Berger, who is the President of the Global Students Forum, Ndivile Mokoena, who is the Project Coordinator of Gender CC South Africa, the Women for Climate Justice, and Erinka Nyanko, who is the Mapuche Congressperson for Chile, and finally, Rodrigo Uprimi, who is a member of the International Commission for Jurists and a former member of the UN Committee for Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Let's welcome them all on stage with warm applause.
Hola, compañeras, compañeros, ¿me se escuchan bien? Sí, ¿me se escuchan? Bueno, por la gente que está en el fondo de la sala, o quita la sala para Universidad de Chile o siéntate, por favor, porque vamos a comenzar con sesión sobre clima. ¿Estamos todos? Sí. Yo voy a me sentar aquí. Y pienso que yo voy a hablar en inglés. Disculpe, pero es un poco más fácil para mí porque mi portuñol es un poco especial. Bueno, estamos todas. I want to welcome everybody to the panel on climate, on indigenous rights, on just and equitable transition. As we know, this is probably the most serious crisis facing all living species on this planet. And we need to make sure that as we conceptualize what we're doing and what crises we're facing, we don't just talk about ourselves. It involves every living being on this planet. Look, our previous panel discussed care with a focus on the responsibilities we place on women as low-paid workers, in formal employment, as the majority of workers in informal employment, and in the home with more and more hours of domestic unpaid obligations. They made the point that public services benefit families and therefore women and girls. And the climate crisis makes access to public services much more difficult. So I think, from my perspective, we need to integrate all the comments from the previous panel into our climate assessments, climate analyses, and climate actions. I was really quite impressed with that panel. Now, for those of you who saw the panel yesterday, Alexander Pinto said all life on this planet is in crisis and at risk. And he talked about the planet's water system as a living organism, which we have been killing steadily. And we're going to have to deal with our water systems as a living organism on this planet. All of the planet's living organisms are going to have to adapt to climate or die. And as we know from the biodiversity negotiations in Montreal as we speak, we are seeing, again, mass extinctions of species. And this is not acceptable. Now, for people, we may have more abilities to adapt. But I suspect that life, well, I know that life is going to get rougher for a lot of us. And we know and we're seeing how that happens and where it happens. Now, before I turn over to the panel, I'm going to assume my role as a trade unionist. I work with Public Services International, as Ashina said, and we represent the trade unions of public service workers in 150 countries with 30 million working women and men. Those are our members. And our responsibility is to negotiate collective agreements that set the terms and conditions of work for these members, which then are legal documents that are submitted to the Labor Ministry. And when there are violations of the terms and conditions of work, then we need to go either to arbitration systems or to the legal system under the labor law. That's our obligation. Now, who here has heard the term just transition? Raise your hand. Who here knows that that term originated in the labor movement? A few of you, yeah, good. Okay, but the fact is that just transition now is one of these terms that everybody uses, and they use it for whatever they want. Now, Rosa spoke about the adaptability of capital and its agents, whether it's the lobbying companies, the corporations themselves. They're now integrating just transition into their discourse, yet they have no idea that it means that you have to protect workers in the transition from high carbon to low carbon activities, mainly in industries. And the concept also means that you have to consult the workers and their unions. And nobody is applying that. Governments are not applying it. Corporations, of course, want to avoid us as much as they can. And a number of organizations involved in climate they don't get the concept of workers being involved in the decisions that have implications for their jobs and their well-being at work. Because look, protecting jobs and incomes is essential to protecting families. And it's one of the key ways of getting out of poverty. If you have decent income, then odds are you can support your family better. And of particular interest to PSI is the energy sector. And the energy sector had a two-day meeting, but energy in all its forms. First of all, it's the production of electricity. How many of you have plugged in an appliance today, somewhere in the wall, whether at your hotel or, I mean, everybody is plugging in something all the time. And if you can't, you really freak out because you're not connected to the world. So electricity and electrons are really important. But also for transport, for heating and cooling, for manufacturing and agriculture. All of these sources of energy must move from high emissions to low emissions. We have no choice. Now, decarbonizing energy and doing it fast is a problem. It means we need to get off of our 200-year addiction, and I say addiction, to fossil fuels. We're like junkies. We're addicted to fossil fuels. Whether we know it or not, we are addicted for the vast majority of us. So what we see are the private sector is making all these green promises. If you've been on British Petroleum's website, or Enel, Endesa, and all of them, they're all green now. Don't believe it. The private sector is not investing in renewable energies in anywhere near the capacity and speed that we need on this planet. And we have the data to speak about it. But part of the problem is the policies, including at global level, are actually blocking public utilities from investing in renewables. They're actually being blocked from doing it. Anyway, so for me, just transition needs to actually be just and equitable transition. It needs to look at all of the issues we're talking about here in these past 4 days, and it needs to look especially at the issues that we heard in the previous panel, which I thought was really excellent. We've got to have in the core of it respect for human rights and the rights of nature. And it's going to require much deeper changes than just changing our technologies. And I think we're aware of that, but it's something that we need to address in our work together. It's not going to be easy, and we're already 20 years too late, but we must do it. And so I am thrilled to moderate a panel of a diverse group of activists who are going to share with us, who are going to address what we need to do, who are going to address how climate is dealing with the rights and needs of women, of indigenous people, of youth, of all species and ecosystems. So I will turn first to La Diputada Erika Ñanco to share her perspective as the first woman Mapuche deputy elected for her region of Chile. She's going to speak to us in Spanish, and she will share with us some comments. Por favor.
Muchas gracias, David. Mari kompula mnyen fa umle pantufa, incheta Erika Ñamco Vázquez piñen, Gualacura los Maputugun, Nueva Imperial meu, novena región de la Araucanía. Para quienes, bueno, veo que acá habemos muchas personas de distintos pueblos, de distintos lugares, y qué bonito que así sea. Yo me presenté en mi idioma, que es el mapuzungún. Difícil que el traductor o traductora lo haya podido traducir, pero les voy a comentar que primero empecé comentándoles diciendo quién soy. Mi nombre es Erika Ñanco, soy de la comunidad de Gualacura, del sector de Nueva Imperial, perteneciente a la novena región, de donde soy representante hoy día en el Congreso. Y estamos acá para hablar no solamente de cambio climático, sino de cómo esto se conjuga en distintos aspectos. Y la verdad es que del lugar desde donde yo provengo, que es la región de la Araucanía, que es la región más pobre de Chile, existe una diferencia no solamente económica, sino también social, que es la que hoy día nos trae a la palestra que el pueblo mapuche exista, no solamente en los medios regionales, como lo es los medios de comunicación que tenemos acá en nuestro país, sino también en medios internacionales. Para quienes desconocen quién es el pueblo mapuche o qué es el pueblo mapuche, quiénes somos los mapuches somos un pueblo que habitamos del sur del Biobío. Antiguamente eso era territorio autónomo, hoy día somos parte claramente del Estado de Chile. Pero esta demanda no habría sido, esta demanda de buscar autonomía para el pueblo mapuche no habría sido un tema si no existiera la diferencia social que hay en nuestra región. Y esta diferencia social tiene un componente de desigualdad climática muy latente, porque el principal conflicto que existe en la región de la Araucanía y en el sur de Chile es el conflicto existente principalmente con las empresas forestales, que como bien lo mencionaba David en un principio, también han hablado sobre ecología, sobre desarrollo verde, pero eso en la práctica no se nota. Quiero comentarles que el 1,7% del PIB a nivel nacional, que representa unos 5,4 miles de millones de dólares estadounidenses, solamente en el 2021 son las ganancias que dejan las empresas forestales. Pero esas ganancias, curiosamente, no se quedan en la región. No se quedan en la región de la Araucanía, no se quedan para las comunidades, no se quedan para el territorio, se quedan en las manos de los grandes empresarios que toman los recursos naturales de nuestra región, usan el suelo de nuestra región y dejan en un completo desabastecimiento no solamente económico, sino también de agua, a las comunidades aledañas. ¿Y por qué comento esta problemática? Porque justamente fueron las empresas forestales las que empezaron a tomarse los territorios del sur de Chile, dejando a muchas comunidades mapuche sin tierra, sin espacio para sobrevivir, y donde hoy día existe falta de agua, existe una sequía total, existe desabastecimiento económico, desigualdad social, desigualdades políticas, porque no puede ser que en pleno 2022 recién tengamos a la primera mujer mapuche diputada de nuestra zona. Ese tipo de diferencias llegan a ser tan grandes que hay 2.329.521 hectáreas plantadas de forestales, donde más del 50% de esas plantaciones pertenecen solamente a 3 grandes firmas, que son la Celulosa Arauco, CMPC y Maciza. Son básicamente quienes controlan el poder de estos espacios. Estas forestales también están exentas tienen exenciones tributarias del 100%, ellas no pagan impuesto territorial y tampoco pagan impuestos específicos, están exentas de pagar contribuciones del suelo. El uso del suelo para las forestales en nuestras regiones no se paga. Bueno, y quiero hacer también un análisis porque no es solamente la región de la Araucanía la que hoy día se ve perjudicada con las plantaciones forestales, sino también el sur de Chile, también en la región del Biobío, ahora mucho más al sur, la región de los lagos, también lo podemos ver en Valparaíso, por ejemplo, entre otros espacios, pero solamente se da que en el sur de Chile está esta problemática latente con respecto al impacto que tiene la industria forestal con los pueblos originarios, con el pueblo mapuche, en este caso el pueblo del cual yo provengo. Quiero comentarles esto porque se ha hablado mucho a nivel nacional de la problemática existente del pueblo mapuche, se habla mucho del conflicto mapuche, un conflicto mal llamado conflicto mapuche, porque esto la verdad existe como una forma de cómo el Estado como institución no se ha hecho cargo de una demanda tan histórica. Y al menos en Chile se habla mucho del conflicto mapuche porque existen camiones quemados, existen empresas que han estado saboteadas por algunos grupos, hay sectores de la política de la derecha, pero principalmente que avalan que existe terrorismo en nuestra región, y eso opaca también las otras realidades que hay en nuestra zona. Principalmente quiero hablar con los delitos más frecuentes, que son principalmente con los de violencia de género, y aquí quiero hacer un énfasis en el panel anterior, donde hablaban justamente de mujeres. Es el delito de violencia de género el que más se instala en nuestra región y es el desafío más grande que nosotros tenemos hoy día para poder visibilizar la realidad de miles de mujeres que viven en nuestra zona y que hoy día están siendo totalmente desprotegidas por las instituciones, porque lo que sale en medios de prensa hacia afuera es básicamente el conflicto político existente entre el Estado chileno y el pueblo mapuche. Acá no se habla de cómo las primeras naciones, de cómo nosotros como mapuche tenemos una conexión con el cuidado de la naturaleza y de los bienes comunes que llega a ser tal que el cuidado de ciertos sectores como ríos, lagos, por ejemplo, que nos entregan y nos abastecen de agua, son parte importante de la protección de nosotros como pueblos, porque la visión de los mapuches siempre ha sido el cuidado con la naturaleza, el cuidado con el medio ambiente, porque somos gente de la tierra, eso significa. Mapuche significa gente de la tierra, mapu es tierra, che es gente, y nosotros somos tierra, somos gente de la tierra. Por eso nos importa el cuidado del clima, por eso nos importa el cuidado de nuestra naturaleza, porque si nosotros no cuidamos nuestra naturaleza tampoco existimos nosotros. Acá me llama un poco la atención porque tenemos una botella de agua que dice que es de los Andes, de la cordillera, ¿cierto? Tenemos agua embotellada. Allá en la región, en las comunidades, no hay agua. Y si la gente quiere abrir su llave, no hay agua, porque las forestales lo han secado. Es la industria la que ha evitado que la gente hoy día, y no solamente la gente, sino también los animales y las demás especies, podamos tener acceso al agua, que es un derecho humano universal. ¿Cómo puede ser que en Chile todavía el agua no sea un derecho humano universal? Son parte de los desafíos que nos corresponde a nosotros también tomar. Y desde el Parlamento estamos en proceso para poder generar insumos que nos permitan no solamente llegar a que el agua sea un acceso humano universal y un derecho humano universal garantizado por Chile, por nuestro Estado, sino también por el cuidado de nuestros bienes comunes de la naturaleza, por el respeto de nuestros pares y por seguir hacia adelante con un desafío de modelo económico que nos permita que sea sustentable y amigable también con el medio ambiente. En esto, bueno, nuestro presidente Gabriel Boric ha hablado bastante sobre el hidrógeno verde como una alternativa hacia un modelo de desarrollo sustentable. Y creo que en ese sentido sería un gran avance también para poder quitarle un poco a estas grandes empresas y grandes corporaciones que solo toman los recursos naturales para generar lucro personal y no colectivo. También estamos trabajando en un proyecto de ley que permita que las empresas, o que obligue, más que permita, que obligue a las empresas forestales a que tributen en los territorios donde hoy día están quitando los bienes comunes, donde están usando el suelo. Acá también existen distintas problemáticas internas dentro del cómo se toma el tema de la crisis climática dentro de las mismas comunidades y la responsabilidad existente en las comunidades mapuches, porque justamente yo vengo llegando ayer de mi zona, de Temuco, donde me reuní con comunidades mapuches que estaban recuperando el lago Caburga, que es un lago que queda en el sector lacustre de la región de la Araucanía, y es un lago que hace un par tiempo atrás estaba básicamente, siempre ha estado retrocediendo, dicen los expertos que es por una falla geográfica, pero esa falla geográfica no es tan falla cuando hay empresarios que están sacando agua de ahí y que ponen diques que evitan que el lago empiece a llevar su curso natural. Ayer nos reunimos con comunidades del sector de Caburga para poder dar un espacio de Nehuen, de Yeyipún, nosotros le llamamos así a nuestras ceremonias espirituales, para que este lago vuelva a tomar su curso natural. Pero esto también se ha logrado gracias al esfuerzo que las comunidades han hecho de quitar el dique que el empresario había puesto para su beneficio personal, porque había un dique que estaba cortando el espacio, había un dique que estaba evitando que el lago pudiese generarse nuevamente para volver a su curso natural y que estaba claramente llevándose el agua hacia un empresario del sector agrícola de gran apellido de la zona. Quería enfocarme en esta presentación básicamente en ese tema, porque es justamente el modelo de desarrollo que tenemos hoy en día el que nos causa estos niveles de desigualdad y el que nos causa estos niveles de violencia política, porque existe en Chile mucho racismo, existe en Chile mucha violencia política y eso es lo que a nosotros nos toca vivir. Pero como no andamos por la vida llorando y creemos que podemos sacar adelante más allá de la victimización, es que estamos trabajando justamente para generar insumos que nos permitan el desarrollo económico de nuestra región, considerando los aspectos que eso tiene que llevar con el cuidado de la naturaleza y del medio ambiente, y de cómo como pueblos originarios, como pueblo mapuche, como primeras naciones, nos hacemos cargo desde las bases para poder respetar a la naturaleza y vivir en conjunto ante estos espacios que deben ser cuidados, respetados y por sobre todas las cosas entregados para que las comunidades también puedan hacerse cargo de ellas. No sé si me habré pasado en el tiempo, sí. Perdónenme por el tiempo pasado, pero agradecida de este espacio y por sobre todas las cosas yo creo que no hay que perder la esperanza, porque si nosotros perdemos la esperanza también se nos pierden las ganas de seguir luchando y la lucha para nosotros siempre va a ser eterna. Toda la vida vivimos, nacimos en lucha y vamos a morir también en lucha. Van a haber muchos cambios que nosotros quizás no vamos a ver, pero tenemos que dejar estos espacios, hacer estos espacios para que las nuevas generaciones sean las que se hagan cargo. Y bueno, también quiero mencionar a mi partido, obviamente, a Revolución Democrática. Yo pertenezco al Frente Amplio, a Revolución Democrática, y desde nuestro partido también hemos estado trabajando en generar insumos para poder darle con el tema de la defensa a la crisis climática y ponernos también metas que puedan ser aplicables en el corto, mediano y largo plazo. Eso sería por mi parte. Muchas gracias a todas, a todos y a todes.
Muchas gracias, señora diputada Ñanco. Estamos felices de que usted está con nosotros, pero también que usted está aquí en la lucha para derechos fundamentales, que sea de la planeta, de la naturaleza, del pueblo indígena y los trabajadores, trabajadoras. Esta es una aliada fuerte. Yo pienso que voy a seguir con el señor Rodrigo, porque primero los dos palestrantes después van a hablar en inglés, pero también Rodrigo es un abogado especialista en derechos humanos y yo soy muy curioso de escuchar sus sugestiones también para cómo nos avanzar en esas crisis climáticas. Por favor. 7 minutos.
Gracias y buenos días a todas y a todos. Es un gusto compartir este panel con ustedes y con ustedes. Yo voy a desarrollar una tesis muy general que luego voy a tratar de aterrizar en 4 tesis más específicas. Y la tesis muy general es que el cambio climático es no solo un desafío monumental, sino que es también una injusticia monumental y que por eso hay que enfrentarlo con distintos criterios de justicia, justicia ambiental, justicia redistributiva, justicia reparativa, etcétera. Y en esos criterios de justicia, el enfoque de derechos humanos juega y podría jugar un papel muy relevante. Y trataré de ver con pronunciamientos de instancias internacionales de derechos humanos en qué consiste hasta ahora ese enfoque de derechos humanos y hasta dónde podríamos potenciarlo aún más. Eso es lo que voy a desarrollar. Entonces, esa tesis general dividida en esas 4 subtesis. Entonces, la primera es muy conocida. El cambio climático es el desafío tal vez más monumental que está enfrentando la humanidad, porque si no somos capaces de enfrentarlo apropiadamente, millones de personas y millones de especies perecerán. Entonces es un desafío enorme, pero no solo un desafío enorme, sino que es una injusticia monumental, y es una injusticia monumental porque quienes hoy sufren los efectos del cambio climático y quienes más los van a sufrir en el futuro, que son sobre todo las poblaciones en situación de vulnerabilidad, sobre todo, pero no exclusivamente, en el sur global, son quienes han sido menos responsables de las emisiones de gases invernadero que han provocado el cambio climático. Creo que una situación así en la humanidad no ha existido tanto. Quienes más sufren un desastre son quienes menos lo provocaron. Si eso es así, y esa es la primera tesis muy conocida, se sigue la segunda de la necesidad de transiciones, pero transiciones justas. Es decir, tiene que tener uno un enfoque de justicia en distintas dimensiones para enfrentar el cambio climático y que éste no recaiga en las poblaciones más vulnerables. Por ejemplo, si uno no tiene un enfoque de justicia, entonces puede uno estar legitimando cosas que ya están ocurriendo, que países del norte global tratan de buscar cero, en teoría, emisiones, pero a través de compras masivas de tierras en países del sur global para hacer reforestación, para captar carbono, y lo que hacen es expulsar a comunidades campesinas y a pueblos indígenas y afrodescendientes de sus tierras. Entonces, si uno no tiene un enfoque de justicia y simplemente ve un tema de reducción de las emisiones, puede descargar el cambio climático en quienes más vulnerables son a los impactos del cambio climático. Entonces, un enfoque de justicia es fundamental. Esa justicia es de distintas maneras. Tiene que tener una mirada hacia atrás, justicia reparadora. ¿Quiénes son los que en el pasado provocaron las emisiones de gases invernadero y tienen mayores responsabilidades? Una justicia distributiva. ¿Quiénes son los que más hoy están ocasionando gases invernaderos y tienen más capacidad de enfrentarlo y qué deberes les implica? Una justicia de género, una justicia étnica, etcétera. Entonces, esa es la segunda idea, tesis que quiero desarrollar, las dos muy conocidas. La tercera, menos conocida en el mundo de quienes luchan contra el cambio climático, es que entonces esto es un problema de derechos humanos también y requiere un enfoque de derechos humanos, y las instancias internacionales de derechos humanos, una de las cuales hago parte, que es el Comité, bueno, por un mes más, que es el Comité de Derechos Económicos, Sociales y Culturales, ha tratado de desarrollar este enfoque. ¿Qué quiere decir este enfoque? Que las obligaciones de los estados de mitigar el cambio climático no son discrecionales, no son algo que los estados pueden o pueden no hacer, sino que es una obligación extraterritorial de derechos humanos de los distintos estados mitigar el cambio climático. Es decir, que un estado no puede decir, no, ¿sabe qué? Mi compromiso en París lo voy a cambiar un poquito. No, es una obligación de derechos humanos. ¿Por qué? Porque la Carta de Naciones Unidas, los artículos 55 y 56, establecen que es deber de todos los estados de cooperar internacionalmente para la plena realización de los derechos humanos. Y si un estado sigue emitiendo gases invernadero, está afectando los derechos humanos de otras poblaciones en el mundo, entonces está violando su obligación extraterritorial. Y ese es un principio, yo creo, ya consolidado en las instancias internacionales de derechos humanos. Cuando nosotros en el Comité DESC empezamos a preguntarle a algunos estados, ¿qué están haciendo ustedes contra el cambio climático en materia de mitigación? Nos decían, pero eso lo discutimos en París, en las COP, no lo discutimos aquí en las instancias de derechos humanos. Y nosotros les dimos no, porque esa es una obligación de derechos humanos. Y eso cambia porque permite empezar a discutir, bueno, ¿cuánto debe ser realmente su deber de...? Ya, me cortó. La segunda es en adaptación. No cualquier política de adaptación es admisible. Tiene que haber políticas de adaptación con enfoque de derechos humanos para proteger a las poblaciones más vulnerables frente al cambio climático. Y con esto termino. Ahí ustedes pueden encontrar, por ejemplo, una declaración importante que hicieron 5 comités de derechos humanos de Naciones Unidas sobre la relación entre cambio climático y derechos humanos. Son 3 páginas, corto, pero yo creo que dice lo esencial de que esas son obligaciones de derechos humanos. ¿Qué falta por hacer en materia de derechos humanos? Creo que falta seguir desarrollando ese enfoque. Es decir, yo creo que ¿por qué el Consejo de Derechos Humanos de Naciones Unidas no discute el cambio climático y solo se discute en las COP? ¿No? Si es un tema de derechos humanos, se debía discutir también en el Consejo de Derechos Humanos y que ahí hubiera un mecanismo, por ejemplo, que hubiera un mecanismo que dijera, bueno, usted, Estados Unidos, que tiene la emisión de gases invernaderos per cápita más alta del mundo, ¿qué va a hacer en los próximos años realmente para reducirlo? Y no solo en un diálogo interestados, sino también un diálogo con presencia fuerte de la sociedad civil. Y con esto termino. Creo que el enfoque de derechos humanos no supera todos los temas de cambio climático, claro que no. Ese es un tema de movilización social y política, pero sí creo que aporta una herramienta suplementaria para lograr las transiciones justas. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Rodrigo. Y también después yo quiero te hablar sobre el lenguaje de las cláusulas sobre pérdidas y daños de un aspecto de un abogado, porque pienso que hay problemas dentro de eso. Pero ese podemos hablar en el grupo de trabajo después. I'm going to move to English, so anybody who needs interpretation, please put on your ears. Because now it's my pleasure to present my colleague to my left, Ndivile from South Africa. You've got a fan club already. Clearly you've been around a bit, and we know that our African sisters and brothers are especially vocal and active. Ndivile, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be in this space and share and hear different perspectives to my fellow panelists. And also, I'd like to start by applauding the previous panel on the insights that they've shared with us, because they truly resonate and intersect with climate justice. What climate justice means for me, as someone coming from African region that is ravaged by climate change disasters like floods, landslides, cyclones, droughts, which impact mostly frontline communities, women and children who are at the cold face of climate change effects. A region that is confronted with increasing displacements, loss of lives and livelihoods related to climate change, despite contributing the least to the global greenhouse emissions. A region struck by poverty, struggling with sustainable development, basic human needs and well-being, while challenged with an urgent need to combat climate change. A region faced with huge fiscal debts through loans from abroad, accumulated for survival purposes. Economies of many African countries are currently on life support because of high public debts and post-coronavirus pandemic induced economic contractions that combined with other stressors to hamper national efforts to achieve sustainable development and climate goals. All this is negatively impacting food security and causing biodiversity loss in Africa, and millions of people are experiencing extreme hunger and are in need of food handouts across the continent. Peasant farmers, of which the majority are women, produce the majority of local food, feeding African homes. Nearly 80% of total food that is consumed by Africans. They also rely mostly on rain-fed agriculture and other natural products available in their territories for their livelihoods. The peasant farmers are also responsible for energy and water provision for their families, and communities are the main caregivers for the sick, making the multiple roles burdensome in the time of crisis. The climate crisis is leading Africa to become a net food importer, resulting in food prices going beyond the reach of ordinary people, which in many cases is undercutting local markets. Instead of wasting time on destructive status quo of fossil extractivism, Africa should be preoccupied with how to take full ownership of these renewable energy potentials and invest in the infrastructure to make them drive harmonious and equitable growth development for the continent and all its people without infringing on their human rights. Climate justice, therefore, means holding big polluters liable for their generations-long infractions and paying for their deliberate acts of indolence and insensitivity. Existing policies must be reviewed to accommodate stiffer punishment and fines on big polluters. Only a just energy transition that is fair, equitable, and gender-sensitive, democratic, affordable, and insulated from corporate influence can place the continent on a new path of growth and development. Climate justice is ensuring that climate policies and legal frameworks are independent from corporate suggestions and influence before, during, and post-implementation. Also, adherence to the development of environmental impact assessments for any project that is implemented. Climate justice also means considering, acknowledging, and respecting frontline communities, indigenous people, women, youth, people with disabilities, voices, needs, and rights, and that they must be part of the decision-making processes to address this crisis. It means collaborating directly with local communities and promoting community-driven approaches and solutions that will prioritize and reclaim their environmental, social, and human rights. In conclusion, since climate change is an existential threat to Africa's communities, ecosystems, and economies, focusing on translating the policy commitments into visible and implementable actions by building specific mechanisms for robust implementation, dissemination, monitoring, and resource mobilization is a pathway to climate justice, as it is a foundational principle of the Paris Agreement processes that countries respond to climate change in a self-determined manner based on their unique circumstances and capacities to respond. So if we talk about climate justice and a just transition, it has to have an element of procedural justice, distributive justice, and restorative justice. Thank you.
Endavili, thank you very much. You were exactly on time, which is also very nice too, because I know there's going to be some comments, and I know that we will have an exchange, but I also know that you're working in the communities in putting the pieces together, and so we hope to have your experience and expertise in the years coming up. Last but not least, Sebastian. You've got the floor, and tell us who you're working with and how you're helping us get out of this crisis, which, please, Sebastian, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, David, and let me start with expressing my gratitude for the invitation and the opportunity to contribute to this panel on behalf of the International Organized Student Movement. The organization I represent is called Global Student Forum. It was founded in 2020 by the largest pre-existing continental regional student federations in their national unions in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. And at this point, we represent the voice of 202 national unions of students in 122 countries and territories. Early this week, I had the privilege to take part in the sectoral meetings of the education group, and we discussed, among many other important issues, the role of the educational community in relation to climate change and the environmental catastrophe. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of most, if not all, colleagues at the sectoral meeting when saying we firmly believe that education has a profound responsibility when it comes to mitigating the impact, but also slowing the progression of climate change. To do so effectively, we need a multidimensional approach within the whole sector, informed and implemented under the democratic involvement of students and education workers and their unions. As a key enabler for the transition to a more sustainable world, at the very baseline, education needs to be publicly funded and sufficiently funded to provide free quality education accessible to all, and in the field of higher education to conduct the necessary research activities in the field of research on sustainable development, to innovate solutions that help governments, the public, the private sector to implement practices that respect and protect our planet. One of the most pressing demands of the contemporary education worker and students movement is that quality climate change education needs to be taught across all curricula, from early childhood education all the way up to higher education. Learning about climate change is a central aspect of quality education. In fact, there is no quality education. We cannot talk about quality education without a climate component within education curricula. And this is why education workers need to be provided with the capacity, with the resources, with the training and skills to integrate climate and sustainability into teaching and learning. Students, in our opinion, should not only achieve climate literacy by the time they complete their educational journey, but we need to create supportive educational environments that encourage student-led climate action and sustainable behaviors. We have the right as learners to gain the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary to sustain our world for future generations, and we need tailor-made education that prepares us for the work in a greener economy. In this effort, we also must take into account the lifelong learning perspective and provide upskilling opportunities to support those who are currently undergoing the necessary transitions from unsustainable to greener jobs. And we're talking about a massive amount, an enormous number of people, of learners, and it's steadily increasing. So just transition as a concept cannot be achieved without catering for the educational opportunities and the educational needs of this group. But reimagining our curricula along the lines of climate change cannot be done without fundamentally rethinking the way we teach and learn in the broader context of intersectionality and the dimensions of social and economic justice. Our education systems need to be decolonized and indigenized to include local sensitivities, traditions and cultures, and critical worldviews. And by incorporating these previously marginalized and excluded voices and pedagogies, education can create an environment that allows more and more people to question persisting imperial practices and the appropriation of labor and resources from the global south in the pursuit of an illusion of everlasting economic growth, primarily in the Western world, at the expense of people and the planet. We are convinced that unjust economic and social realities are upheld and reproduced by an unjust allocation of power within our political systems. But by decolonizing our education and making it more accessible to everyone, we can shift that power and transform socioeconomic realities lastingly. Earlier this year, we had a students' pre-congress to COP27, hosted with the All Africa Students Union and the GSF in Ghana, and we had elected leaders of 30 countries coming together to define their vision for climate justice. For us, climate justice is about learning from past and current inequalities and understanding the implications, but also understanding that those, and it was said by colleagues before, who have contributed the least and are in the worst position to adapt to it, are paying and will continue to pay the highest price. By 2050, conservative estimates, when it comes to loss and damage costs, estimate the cost of loss and damage in developing world between 1 trillion and 1.8 trillion US dollars. And these calculations do not include non-economic losses such as loss of life, loss of territory, loss of culture. So it's out of the question that developed nations have a historic and moral responsibility to act, but yet looking at the outcomes of the latest conference of the parties, are failing to phase out fossil fuels fast enough and are continuously resisting to make severe and sincere financial commitments to finance adaptation and loss and damage. So the international student movement, as the largest youth-led movement of young people representing interests, has been at the forefront of this struggle because everything is at stake for young people. Everything is at stake. They are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. But despite many achievements that were made by organizations like Climate for Future, Fridays for Future, and Extinction Rebellion, we need to become smarter and we need to be better organized, engaging in strategic alliances with trade unions, with civil society organizations, and like-minded and value-aligned actors. I think only relentless collective action and grassroots mobilization in all of the spaces that are at our disposal can create the momentum to really take on fossil fuel companies, big capital, their lawyers, their armies of lobbyists, and the politicians that they have bought, the politicians they have in their pockets. So I think that this conference really provides a wonderful opportunity to do that, to strategize and create action plans. And let me say this, the student movement is in a very good position, both at the university and school level, national, regional, and global level, to be a partner in this effort. And I would like to encourage all of you, if you're not working with student unions already, to reach out to their offices. And if you need contacts, I'm here and happy to facilitate getting you in touch. In that spirit, thanks for granting me the time, and I hope we can use this conference to build a movement that goes on beyond this summit and truly create tangible actions about these things that concern us all. Thank you.
Sebastian, I think you must have trained your speech because you did 6 minutes and 56 seconds. Whoa! Thank you.
Needed to make up some time.
Look, I've got a big clock here, and it shows how much time we have left before we move into the workshops. Before turning over to the floor, I want to abuse my position as moderator to mention a couple more issues of concern to PSI, because climate chaos is here and it's not going away anytime soon. We've got to protect ourselves. We've got to protect our communities, our families, and our natural environment because the inevitable climate disasters are here. We have no choice but to adapt. So we need better defenses for floods and storms. The most damage from the big storms is too much water. Just look at Pakistan, but you just look at how many countries, it's the water that moves in and at speed and at volume. We're now talking about atmospheric rivers. Who's heard that expression before? Atmospheric rivers, rivers in the sky that come and empty on us. So we need to protect ourselves against that. You also mentioned droughts, and these are what they call slow onset. Droughts are slow to develop, but we've heard of so many places where droughts have been developing for 10, 15 years. We need to anticipate and protect. Also against the wildfires. Another issue that we're seeing more and more is excessive heat or excessive cold. Workers can't handle it. Our bodies can't handle it. So we've got to figure out as trade unions, but also collectively, how to protect the workers on that. We're going to need to use as many nature-based solutions, but we have to be careful about our terminology again, because as Rosa said, about the corporate ability to adapt and to absorb our concepts and to still continue maximizing profits, we need to be very clear. But we will have to invest heavily in our public infrastructure. There is no doubt about it. Our public infrastructure and public services are key to helping us minimize damage. And if we want our public services to be able to respond when the dangers arise, which they will, we need to keep in mind that half of the 8 billion inhabitants on this planet live in extremely dense urban settings. And they have also very specific and particular needs. And most people will turn to their local public services to help them in times of trouble. So we have to make sure these are available and prepared, that the workers in all these public services are prepared and equipped. But as we're hearing, we're heading into a massive austerity policy at global level, which we have to fight. Now, someone talked about progressive taxation. I think we need to talk about aggressive taxation. And I get it, when your public services are not good, are not responsive to your needs, you don't feel right about paying taxes. But let's be real, it's not about the taxes that you and I pay. It's about the mega rich and the multinationals. Those are the ones we have to get really aggressive with, and not just progressive, even though I understand the comment. But while the UN climate summits drag on ever so slowly, and the promised climate funds don't come, and when they do, they're tied to privatization and marketization. So we have to have all of these issues on our plates. We've just done a study on the Green Climate Fund, which will be on our website, and it's totally directed to the market. Now, I think I've said enough or too much. I think it's over to you. I think that we have a couple of microphones roving. People can either ask questions or make comments. This is fair. And please, let's open the floor. I see somebody is already in the front row, ready to go. If you could please tell us your name and the organization you're from, and then make your comments, please. Thank you.
¿Aló? Sí. Muchas gracias y muchas gracias al panel que fue muy, muy interesante. Soy Alicia Muñoz, presidenta de la Asociación Nacional de Mujeres Rurales Indígenas, Anamuri y Afrochilena. Represento acá en esta conferencia a la vía campesina a nivel internacional. Quisiera llamar un poquito la atención. Nosotros trabajamos en la Comisión de la Alimentación, la comisión que discutimos mucho el tema de la soberanía alimentaria, el tema de la salud, el tema de todos estos temas que ustedes han puesto en la mesa tan claramente para nosotras. Nosotros pensamos, como mujeres rurales, como mujeres campesinas, como mujeres indígenas, que el cambio climático viene por las mujeres, porque las mujeres somos las que hacemos la agricultura a menor escala, las que trabajamos en circuitos cortos y que no queremos que nuestros productos sean llevados desde Santiago a Punta Arenas o de Punta Arenas hasta Arica. Queremos trabajar en circuitos cortos donde nuestra producción se consuma en cada localidad, y eso va a bajar todo lo que ustedes han denunciado, lo que significa el gasto en petróleo, en todo lo que es los traslados. Por lo tanto, quisiéramos pedirle a la comisión del documento final de la sistematización de la declaración de esta conferencia tan importante, que por favor quedara establecido en un par de líneas el tema de que la agroecología es un camino para ayudar a mitigar todo este dolor que ustedes han puesto en la mesa y el panel anterior también, que se refirió muy fuerte al tema de nosotros las mujeres, que tenemos que llevar el tema del cuidado, el tema de cómo nuestros pocos recursos los tenemos que estirar como elástico para darles una alimentación un poco más sana a nuestros hijos. Así que, por lo tanto, nuestra petición es esa, que el tema de la agroecología es un camino. El tema de la soberanía alimentaria para nosotros como vía campesina que se ha discutido a nivel del mundo, esté también reflejado en un par de letras. Muchas gracias, y que esta conferencia realmente ha sido para nosotras como organizaciones de mujeres del campo una oportunidad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. My name is Oluwafemi Matthew Akimbode. I work for Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, called CAPA. I think the panel has done a very good job to this issue of climate change, just transition, climate change as it affects the rights of workers. And I think one of the key issues that has come out from this panel is that there will be need for funds to tackle the issue of climate change. And for us from the global south, we are very clear that we know how we got here. There were polluters that still continue to pollute. For us to get the necessary funds for climate change, polluters must pay. We are here because of the historical pillage of our environment, of our resources, to develop the global north. So, when we do ask that the global north should be responsible for climate adaptation, we're not asking for charity. We're asking for justice. And so, issues like loss and damage came into the UNFCCC, but needs to be strengthened. We don't want mechanisms that will again continue to put Africa in debt crisis. We don't want mechanisms that donate funds in the form of insurance. What we are asking for is ecological reparation. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por un excelente panel. Mi nombre es Sergio Chaparro, soy de Tax Justice Network y soy colombiano, y quisiera hacer una pregunta a partir del contexto colombiano, pero que conecta con desafíos y demandas diferentes que escuché a lo largo de estos días. Y es que, por un lado, existe una fuerte demanda de comunidades locales, pueblos indígenas, campesinos, comunidades afrodescendientes, por mantener control sobre sus territorios y sobre los recursos en esos territorios conforme a sus propios modelos de vida. Pero por otro lado existe una demanda, por ejemplo, por sectores más urbanos en relación con, por ejemplo, tener tarifas accesibles a servicios públicos, incluyendo la energía, y una presión de los gobiernos, particularmente en el sur global, para afrontar unas crisis acumuladas de deuda, crisis fiscales y, por ejemplo, restricción del espacio de políticas para un modelo de desarrollo que transite hacia economías bajas en carbono. Sin detrimento del tema de la responsabilidad principal del norte global en la agenda climática, creo que es necesario pensar como parte del programa de esta conferencia, no solamente en el elemento redistributivo de las políticas, que es esencial, sino también en cómo crear un modelo productivo que ligue las dos demandas que acabo de mencionar. O sea, cómo podría avanzarse en un proyecto de desarrollo por protección popular que permita empoderar a las comunidades locales, que permita a los países del sur global avanzar en una industrialización verde, pero que a su vez reduzca las vulnerabilidades económicas que de estos países en su reto por enfrentar un modelo de desarrollo alternativo dadas las asimetrías globales. Entonces quería preguntarle su opinión al respecto sobre esta necesidad de vincular las demandas de distintos sectores en torno a un modelo de desarrollo productivo en líneas ecológicas y populares. Gracias.
Thank you. I'm Emilia Reyes with the feminist Mexican organization Equidad de Género, Ciudadanía, Trabajo y Familia. I just wanted to say that we need, as I said yesterday, a system change. So it is very important that more than calling for more funds or polluter pays principles, we really need to call for the accountability of those who have been producing all of this damage, not only on climate change, but also biodiversity destruction and ocean acidification, etc. So I just wanted to call out for this audience and this group to consider degrowth for the wealthy, degrowth for the developed countries, degrowth for the wealthy in the north and in the south, degrowth for the sectors that are harming, that are damaging, that are extracting and predating nature. And this is something that needs to happen, because if we can keep on going asking for money without shifting the system, then the planet is going to keep on being destroyed. And in this path as well, calling for that change in the system means that we call out the false solutions that are out there, like net zero instead of real zero, like nature-based solutions instead of ecosystem-based solutions, or these type of proposals such as geoengineering or even nuclear, or those false debates about fossil fuels being needed for the development of developing countries is not true. We cannot use fossil fuels to develop the South if we are destroying the planet. So I think this is a very harsh debate that we need to have, because also trade unions are trying to position that language here in this space, and we need to counter that argument by saying that we don't need development in the sense of growth that we have been imposed by this capitalistic system. We need to find better paths, and our sister from Via Campesina and many others have the solutions also for the Global South. We're not saying we need to degrow the Global South, we need to find alternative paths and degrow the North, but in that path as well, we cannot keep on pretending that the South is going to exploit the nature as it has been done in the North. So thank you so much.
Sí, un más. One more.
Thank you. I was particularly happy when I have heard the example that he was giving about the bottle of water. Since we're here, we're talking about public services, we're talking about tax incentive, PPP, all these technical issues. It's fine. The work we are doing is very relevant, but we have to bear in mind who are the people we stand for, who are the people we are accountable for. While we are pushing the agenda at global level, trying to do this reporting and sharing it, exactly the people who are in the land, in the landlocked side, do they know exactly what we are advocating for? They know that education is a right, water is a right, but do they know what education right implies in terms of accessibility, cost, in terms of accessibility, distance? Do they know water as a right, what it implies in terms of quality, accessibility, in terms of sustainability? I think we have to take these technical things, this report, translate it in a very simple, comestible way to be sure that as we are a right-oriented organization, the community we stand for are also in the same level of information, but also understanding. If we don't do that, we can win the fight at global level, but they will be being happy, applauding, seeing public service as a gift, as a privilege, which is not fair, and which is the case. That's what we are living. So let's have an agenda around that. We are talking about climate. We have this fund, loss and damages fund. We are happy. Of course, there is a green climate fund, a lot of fund. There will be fun because they have money, because they are still polluting. They are still using fossil fuel. They have opportunity to grab money around tax carbon. What are we doing? We are we are giving a finance. We are finalizing. I don't know if the right is wrong. We are financializing the issue of climate. Climate justice is not only a matter of money. We are on the reaction They are migration. Climate migrant implies land problem, implies the consular procedure problem. Let's think about that. If you don't do that, they will continue polluting, they will continue doing what they have to do because they have the opportunity. And I will finish with one last point. There can be no climate justice without youth. Let's capture the potential of young people on this fight. We are standing for them. If you're talking about migration, it's them. If you're talking about loss and damage, it's them. They cannot cultivate because they are losing their arable land. They cannot stay in their locality because the water, the sea is taking their homes. Let's imply them in the work. Let's involve them as hear what they are doing because they are doing a lot of amazing things. No climate justice without youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I know there's many more people who would like to speak, and guess what? You'll get a chance, just not here now. In the workshop, please stick around. I'm going to ask our panelists to give us their final reflections, and I'll start with la diputada, por favor, señora. Reflexiones finales breves.
Bueno, sin lugar a dudas, se nos vienen muchos desafíos por delante, pero como decía por ahí un artista de la tele de una serie que se da por acá en Chile que se llama Malcolm, el futuro es hoy, viejo. Ya los jóvenes de hoy, adelante seremos viejos, pero el futuro va a seguir siendo hoy, y así también mañana. Así es que hay que ponerse las pilas ahora, porque ponerse las pilas me refiero a organizarse, a accionar y a seguir adelante luchando por las demandas que nos parecen justas, porque si no lo hacemos ahora, mañana ya será tarde. Muchas gracias.
Rodrigo, ¿tienes tu micrófono?
Sí, sí.
Por favor.
Gracias. Muchas gracias por las preguntas y comentarios, muy pertinentes todos. Yo creo que algunas se cruzan. Creo que la pregunta de Sergio Chaparro sobre cómo combinar distintas demandas fue un poquito, o una línea de respuesta fue la que nos dio Alice de Vía Campesina al inicio. Yo creo que hay formas de producción que hay que revitalizar, como la agroecología, que permiten mejora del bienestar de las comunidades rurales y al mismo tiempo control por ellas de los procesos productivos sin impactos ambientales como los que tiene la agroindustria. Entonces creo que hay que recuperar y pensar en esas vías, pero sí creo que hay, y eso tiene que ver con el comentario de Emilia, creo que hay un debate sobre cómo eso se aterriza en una visión de desarrollo distinta. Y ahí tenemos que invertir esfuerzos en pensar cómo puede ser esa forma de desarrollo distinta, y ahí no hay aún respuestas fáciles. Y las dos últimas comentarios y preguntas, yo estoy de acuerdo con lo que decía Emilia, si entendí bien, los mecanismos de rendición de cuentas, de accountability, y ahí es donde creo que los instrumentos de derechos humanos, si uno asume un enfoque de derechos humanos sobre el cambio climático, pueden tener fuerza, porque precisamente derechos humanos es mecanismos de accountability y de rendición de cuentas. Entonces sí, creo que, como tú decías, estamos en un futuro que es inmediato y con unos desafíos enormes, y agradezco enormemente esta conversación para tratar de encontrar vías. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and insights. I agree with them. I agree with everything that you have said. And in developing models of coming out with concrete and tangible way to move forward and actions, I think there has to be transparency and accountability. We need all stakeholders on board, and In my experience, governments, usually what they do, they don't like putting everybody together in one room. When they have to discuss with business, with private sector, they'll avoid bringing in trade unions or even civil society. So we need to move from that agenda and have everybody on board. And yeah, also agreeing 100% with Emilia's input, because we need to change and shift the system and the narrative that we are currently using. And yeah, just lastly, I think if we continue with fossil fuels and thinking that fossil fuels will help with development, will forever experience loss and damage. Even the loss and damage finance that is established won't make a difference. It won't help as long as we still support and push for fossil fuels. And lastly, I think addressing climate change with true and honest justice is safeguarding human rights, and that's the path to go. Thank you so much.
I see that the timer on the TV is already on 0 since quite a while, so we'll keep it very brief. I agree with everything that is said. I think it's fundamentally a question of justice. And I want to pick up on what the colleague in the back said about, do we know what our rights are? Do young people know they have a right to climate justice, to water, to education? And as the education activist that I am, I do think that education is the solution for that. Active citizenship education, teaching the things that we are discussing here, getting young people angry. It might be a bit too late, but nevertheless, we need to undertake all efforts to use our educational systems, but also adult education, to talk about these core issues and make people understand that through democratic structures, there is a way out. We need to get our policymakers to take the decisions that actually solve these massive, massive problems that we are facing.
Thank you, Sebastian. Look, language is important, and we know that natural resources are used for the profit machines, despoiled and abandoned. And I want to call your attention to the language of human resources. It's, again, the same thing, used for profit, despoiled and abandoned. So let's pay attention when we go back and we talk about human resources. I want to thank our panel, but I also want to thank all of the people making possible this session, our interpreters, the audio, video, and web crew, the people feeding us, providing us our water and keeping our caffeine levels high enough, and our comrades organizing this whole thing. What I draw from this is that unity is the most important as we go ahead. We need to unite our various and diverse strengths. We need to organize, educate, communicate, and mobilize, because el pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. Gracias. Ashina.
Thank you so much. And another warm round of applause for the inspiring panel and the contributions from all of you, the enthusiasm and eagerness to continue this conversation. Please bear with me. I have only 3 announcements as we go into the next part of the program. The first is that now we're going to break into the workshops. So the workshop on climate justice, indigenous people's rights, decolonization, just and equitable transitions will be here in this room. And the workshop on feminist alternatives will be at the University of Chile. There will be a team at the back with the signs to lead everyone who wants to join the Gender Justice and Feminist Alternatives workshop. They have the signs there, and you'll just need to follow them. This will take place from now until 4:30, with a lunch break in between, and then 4:30 to 5:30, we have a break. And then the synthesis session starts at 5:30 at Hotel Fundador. Now, as you know, all of the sectors have been contributing to the language that will go into the outcome document for this conference, which we're now calling the Santiago Declaration on Public Services, and we'll all have an opportunity together to review the draft that we have and finalize and input into it. It'll be a very exciting session. Please bring your phones. Please, yes, bring your enthusiasm and ideas so that we can all have a chance to put into it collectively. And finally, at 6:30, we will all gather at the entrance of Hotel Fundador to walk together to the venue for the closing session. This will be at a terrace on a hill with a beautiful view of the city. There'll be food, there'll be drinks, there'll be a chance for everyone to share their reflections and their thoughts on the whole conference. I can't pronounce the name of the terrace where we're going, but it is in your program, and it will be shared in the WhatsApp groups and distributed. Because it's up a hill, we'll walk to the base of the hill, and there'll be a van going back and forth to help people get to the top, so that we can all enjoy this time together. Yes, that's all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.